Hari Om Sato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Abir Moiti. O dearly beloved, lead us from this place of endless change and relentless noise to thine abode of silence, serenity, and peace. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through with thy everlasting, shining presence. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So welcome those of you who are online and those of you who have taken the trouble to come to the chapel this morning. Announcements, of course. The center will be open during July for all usual activities for the fully vaccinated. On the other hand, we will be closed all of August. All of August, the center will be closed for all activities except evening arati. And that will be done by devotees either here in the chapel or from their home shrines. Our next Seva Saturday will be in September, the second Saturday in September, the 11th. So please mark that in your calendar. The reason I bring that up is that yesterday we had a Seva Saturday for July, and only 2 people came. There were good turnouts for the Seva Saturdays that we had, the extra Seva Saturdays we had in June, but yesterday was not well attended, so please do keep that in mind. Keep an eye on the e-newsletter and on our website's homepage for announcements about visiting swamis in the fall. That would be late September, October. We should have some visiting swamis. Sharda, are there any announcements I should have made or might have made that I didn't?
No, thanks.
Okay, good. All right, again, thanks for coming, all of you, online and in the chapel. There'll be no song this morning. No one volunteered to sing, and I don't feel in particularly splendid voice to offer a song myself. So I'll just start right in. July is a month for study of Raja Yoga, a spiritual path often called the yoga of meditation. A Raja Yogi uses ancient, proven spiritual techniques to calm the body, quiet the mind, and gain control of her or his attention. Regular daily practice of contemplation and concentration may lead to meditation, which can reveal the divine presence and liberate you from the cycle of rebirth and death. Just a few words about that last. Contemplation and concentration may lead to meditation, which can reveal the living divine presence, which within the Raja Yoga tradition is traditionally called the Atman. There is no difference between the word Atman and the Godhead, that is the ultimate divine presence, or Brahman. All of those are equivalent terms. You'll hear them used somewhat interchangeably this morning. Revelation, as we'll hear, of your divine nature, your internal, eternal, divine nature, your birthright, may lead to liberation from the cycle of rebirth and death. So the topic this morning, since we're going to study Raja Yoga for the month, is how well do you know yoga? Perhaps you have been practicing Hatha Yoga for some time with a qualified teacher. You know a flexible routine of poses, asanas, and you have gained physical strength, poise, and a sense of inner balance. These are three wonderful fruits of yoga training. And for those of you who haven't ever practiced yoga in that way, Hatha Yoga, you will find that it is a remarkable experience. You really do gain a different sense of yourself, which is the whole point of yoga, is to change our self-identification from one of limitation and bondage to one of freedom, which in the beginning with the Hatha Yoga poses, the asanas, you discover a sense of suppleness, a sense of freedom of movement, of poise that you simply didn't know before. And you also gain a sense of self-confidence, because if you practice regularly and gain these benefits, you get a much better control of yourself. These are wonderful aspects of Hatha Yoga. Many people don't know how yoga came to the West. There are many stories about it. It's pretty well recognized that Swami Vivekananda first introduced yoga to a wide audience of Americans in the mid-1890s. He called it Raja Yoga, the royal path to conquering your internal nature. Vivekananda's translation of and commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras was published in July 1896. The book became a bestseller in the United States and Great Britain, influencing the spiritual and intellectual thought leaders of both countries. As a matter of fact, it became a bestseller wherever English was well known and spoken. Now, it's an interesting fact that Swami Vivekananda did not want to write this book. It's the only book that he ever wrote. Everything else of his collected works is either his letters, of course he wrote those, or his classes and talks. Swami Vivekananda wrote Raja Yoga at the insistence primarily of his English devotees. But then as soon as the English devotees began to make a noise about it, the Americans also joined in and said, yes, Swami, yes, please tell us how to pursue this. So he wrote Raja Yoga. Now there are some other interesting facts about the book Raja Yoga and Swami Vivekananda here in the West. As was said earlier, many intellectuals and thought leaders of various kinds, including writers, were deeply affected by Swami Vivekananda. Some of you know the name L. Frank Baum. L. Frank Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz and the other Oz books. The Wizard of Oz was the first. L. Frank Baum, his wife, and his mother-in-law were in the audience from the very first day of the Parliament of World's Religions in September of 1893. They were, at the time, theosophists, followers of Annie Besant and so on. They were absolutely captivated by Vivekananda and made sure to attend every one of his talks during those days of the Parliament. Baum himself became quite a devotee. I don't think there's any evidence that he became a disciple of Vivekananda, but he became a very strong follower. And the book Raja Yoga, when it was published in 1896, just bowled him over. He had attended many of Swami's talks after the Parliament of World Religions, and he was quite taken with the book Raja Yoga. If looked at through that lens, that prism, you can see that the characters of The Wizard of Oz, the principal characters, are the four yogas. Dorothy herself represents Karma Yoga. The scarecrow, the headman, the man with his head filled with straw, represents Jnana Yoga. The Tin Man, of course, is very easily identified as representing Bhakti Yoga. And the lion, the so-called cowardly lion, though he absolutely was not, represents Raja Yoga. And you can see this if you take this attitude toward it and read the book, you'll see that this adventure that they take to Oz represents the spiritual journey for us all. And one of the key facts, of course, is that each of those characters already possessed what they thought they were going to seek and find. Dorothy already possessed the ability to go home. She didn't know how to use it yet, the ruby slippers, but she had them from the very first moments she arrived in Oz. The scarecrow was very thoughtful, very intelligent. very philosophical. He already possessed what was necessary to unfold Jnana Yoga. The Tin Man thought he had no heart, and yet he displayed love and compassion and heart constantly. And of course, the so-called cowardly lion proved his courage again and again and again. So I say this so that perhaps you yourself will read the book Raja Yoga and see how these things are spelled out in such a way that you can recognize them. And it's a fun part of our adventure. Swami Vivekananda taught that from Patanjali's point of view, Patanjali being the author of the Yoga Sutras, Swami Vivekananda taught that from Patanjali's point of view, the deeper purpose of the asanas, the poses in Hatha Yoga, is to allow your body to sit perfectly still, comfortably, for long enough to turn the mind within. So everything else is a side benefit. This is the real purpose of the asanas, to allow your body to sit comfortably for long enough, sit perfectly still, comfortably for long enough to turn the mind within. And Vivekananda made a startling promise. He said that sinking into the silence of meditation will take away all our misery. By analyzing your own mind, he wrote, you, quote, come face to face, as it were, with something which is never destroyed, something which is, by its own nature, eternally pure and perfect. Of course, he's referring to the Atman. This encounter with pure consciousness, which Patanjali calls the Atman, the source of your being, liberates you, quote, from fear, from unsatisfied desire. I'll repeat that. The Atman experience of the Atman liberates you from fear, from unsatisfied desire. Quote, this is the Swami Vivekananda. A man will find that he never dies, and then he will have no more fear of death. When he knows that he is perfect, he will have no more vain desires. And both causes being absent, there will be no more misery. There will be perfect bliss, even while in this body. Now, this is the startling promise that Vivekananda makes. That by practicing Raja Yoga, you will have this encounter with the Atman, which he characterizes as perfect and lacking nothing, eternal, deathless, and so it frees you from any sense of doom or any sense of needfulness. Swamiji Vivekananda could make this stupendous promise because he knew from his own experience the truth of what he was saying. He knew that once you experience the Atma, and therefore know it to be deathless, there can be no more fear of death. And when you know that that being, lacks nothing, is complete, in Sanskrit, purna, what is there to desire? When Christ said, "Be ye perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect," he was pointing to this exact same state of being. That perfection is eternal, limitless, it is infinite, and changeless. Yet, why should you believe what the Swami says? You may know that learning Hatha Yoga's asanas yield pleasing and practical results. But what proof is there that if you take even more time to follow Patanjali's other instructions, you can achieve anything like what Vivekananda promises? I'm going to repeat that because this is the question that the rest of the talk answers. You may know that learning Hatha Yoga's asanas yields pleasing and practical results, and it does. But what proof is there that if you take even more time to follow Patanjali's other instructions, you can achieve anything like what Vivekananda promises? And of course, this is the question that we should ask. We should never take any of these things on any kind of blind faith. We use a kind of working faith and then say, let it prove itself to me. Let it prove itself to me. So how would that happen? Well, first, before we go on, is there any question at all or anything to add or ask about this promise of Vivekananda's? About this promise that is Vivekananda's because it is also made by Patanjali? Anything at all? Yes.
Oh, Cindy was pointing out to me, but I don't know what she wants me to do, so I'll talk instead.
I want you to turn that up just a little bit, the
Okay,
temperature, please, thank you.
You're cold.
No, I just, it's making so much change.
Okay. But I do have a comment.
Yes.
The thing about taking away all of your misery, I am skeptical of that. If it refers to taking away all of your misery forever, if it refers to moments of complete freedom from misery and complete freedom from the bondage of the illusion of self and complete happiness and union, those moments exist. And I think a lot of people that meditate a lot will experience those moments. But over the course of my life, I've been doing this for a long time, I periodically felt like a real failure because I still had, misery and neurosis and so on. But then I look at all the other people I know that have practiced it over the course of their lives, including the swamis that I've known. And I haven't known anybody to have complete freedom from misery forever. It's still worth doing. It's wonderful that you experience complete freedom for a moment or whatever. That's wonderful. And I know you once told me that you had met one guy that you thought had achieved complete freedom, eternally. But if that exists, it's very, very rare. And the way it's worded, I run into this talking to people that have done a lot of meditation, feel like failures because they, they're still as neurotic as anybody. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you for sharing them. Absolutely right on from your perspective. This is how it looks. And I think all of us can share that skepticism. We should be skeptical. But what would happen truly if you became absolutely convinced by your own experience that there was no such thing as death, and that you lacked for nothing ever now, and there was no possibility of you lacking for anything again? This is what the Swami promises.
Can I make one comment about that? And
Please.
about that is that just from what I've seen, people who have what are called near-death experiences seem to have that, they lose that fear of death.
Mhm.
And it really does change the amount of suffering they have, not the amount of things that go wrong in their lives, but it really does change it, which, maybe this is an aside, but it points to the probably a fact that our biggest, deepest fear is fear of death, or what happens when we die. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you. And what we discover as we learn from these great souls is that it isn't that the causes of suffering go away. Our experience of them changes so that we no longer receive them and experience them in the way that we did before, when we believed that they were important.
I'll make one other comment. Or were you finished? Did I interrupt you?
Please go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, the fear of death, that's one of the things that I did notice. It seems to me that my fear of death has disappeared, that I don't fear being dead. Now, I may be surprised, maybe I'll be laid on my deathbed and realize I was kidding myself. The way it feels now, it feels like the fear of being dead is gone. And I've talked to a lot of people about this recently, because I'm going to have a surgery that has a certain mortality rate. That's pretty common for people our age, my age, to say that they're not really afraid of being dead. But most everybody says they're afraid of the discomfort that can come in the dying process. The pain and discomfort of dying. That's very common comment. And that's the way I feel. Being dead doesn't scare me, but going through a lot of suffering, physical suffering in the process of dying does scare me sometimes.
Well, the Swami is making a distinction between physical suffering and the psychic misery that comes when we do fear death, and that we are constantly in the possession of desire. That's the distinction that the Swami is making. There can be no doubt that physical suffering, the suffering of this action and experience suit we wear, will continue. It continued in the life of Swami Vivekananda, and he remarked on it. If you read his letters, he remarked on it quite touchingly and very pointedly. But he also said that he was floating above it. Floating above it. And this is what he meant by there's suffering, but there's no misery. Anything else from anyone? Thank you very much for participating this way. This is exactly what it means to study the art of spirituality together. So how can you become convinced that there's something to what the Swami says and that it's worth the investment of your time? The first evidence will be found in the life of a qualified teacher of concentration and meditation, a woman or man who shows by the way they live and behave that they are free from fear and vain desire, that they are cheerful, even blissful. When you are attracted to someone who offers to teach you Patanjali's yoga, watch closely and critically for some time. I'm going to repeat that because this is the key to your confidence in this person as a qualified teacher. When you are attracted to someone who offers to teach you Patanjali's yoga, watch closely and critically for some time. How does that teacher interact with you and others? What does he or she talk about in casual conversation? As you observe these and other aspects of the teacher's life, your body's intuitive sense can let you know whether to accept instruction from that person. If you remember what Scrooge says when he experiences his awakening, he says to his clerk, "Bob, I have not taken leave of my senses. Bob, I have not taken leave of my senses. I have come to them." And of course, this is our birthright as well. We have very, very excellent senses. Most of the time, we're not paying very good attention to them because of our distractions. When we practice to this focus on this teacher that we're evaluating, if you pay attention to your body will tell you, I'm not content with this person as a teacher, or I feel comfortable in this person's presence. So that's the first indication that you feel comfortable in the presence of someone who has offered to teach you. The second proof is the saintly personalities alive today or in the recent past that practiced meditation, centering prayer, or other methods similar to those taught by Patanjali. Some sterling examples are Mother Teresa. For those of you who know about him, Swami Ranganathananda. He was a president of the Ramakrishna order, but he was a very well-traveled speaker, very powerful personality. His little book, Divine Grace, is on sale at the bookshop here. Swami Ranganathananda. He started out as a cook at the Ramakrishna mission in Bilramat. And he was a Brahmin, and then he just grew and grew and grew. So Mother Teresa, who we all know something about, I'm sure, Swami Ranganathananda, and of course the Dalai Lama. If you're following the Dalai Lama's life, what What an amazing human being he has been and is constantly a truth teller, pure and simple and clear-hearted truth teller. Cynthia Bourgeot, for those of you who are following along the development of mystical Christianity, Cynthia Bourgeot is an absolutely sterling example, as is Father Thomas Keating. There's the example of Amma, the hugging saint, and Thich Nhat Hanh. These are just a few shining examples of what happens, and you can find out by studying their life what they've done. They have practiced something analogous to what Patanjali teaches, and so became saintly in that way. Their radiant lives, which have been of great benefit and inspiration to millions of people, demonstrate the power of reaching deep inside yourself to discover that, quote, which is never destroyed. Now, this same message, for those of you who have confidence in Bhagavad Gita, that same message is delivered in chapter 2 by Sri Krishna to Arjuna about the true nature of our being, which he says emphatically and very illustratively. He gives many illustrations. It cannot be in any way destroyed or diminished or made less. Yet the most potent proof will be your own experience. As Vivekananda points out in his introduction to Raja Yoga, you cannot learn chemistry. You cannot learn chemistry just by reading a textbook. Quote, you must go to the laboratory, he writes, take different substances, mix them up, compound them, experiment with them, and out of them will come a knowledge of chemistry. So he's saying that this business of learning Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is a hands-on experience. For Patanjali, your entire body, mind, and intellect are that laboratory in which you can gain the full knowledge of yoga as defined by Patanjali and Vivekananda. So let's pause and talk about those three proofs that I talked about. First, your experience of someone who offers to teach you. They should demonstrate what it is. Their life that you should feel comfortable in their presence, that they offer you something that approximates this fearlessness and attitude of desirelessness. That's the first proof. The second proof is the great saints. And of course, they go down through history. The book, Love Poems from God, is the testimony of 12 saints that make this same representation. But I cited a number of more recent and familiar ones to us. So the second proof is that there are people that you can see by their very lives have become quite remarkable, so that their lives and their teachings have affected and inspired millions. But the third and the most important is your own experience as you practice. What happens as you practice? Does this actually begin to unfold for you? So before we go on, is there anything further that anyone would like to ask or add?
Swamiji,
Yes, Uma.
sorry, we are stuck at home because the garage door opener will not work due to failure of power. So I'm here. Anyway, I wanted to refer to a book which I'm sure most of us might have read, and that is Tuesday with Morris.
Yes.
That book, the student of Dr. Morris, who was a wonderful teacher of spiritual attitude, spiritual experience, spirituality. And he used to say to students, just like you mentioned, that when the time comes, whether you have grasped my knowledge or not, will be decided by your attitude to death and the way you behave at that time. So this student, time came when the teacher was near death, and this person who wrote the book, he visited him, not visited, stayed with him for over a week or so. And he minutely watched every move, every thought, and all kinds of changes that he saw in front of his eyes. And he came to realize that whatever he taught, he actually practiced at his own time when he was about to leave the world. And he was so impressed and so inspired that he wrote this book called Tuesdays with Morris, because he used to visit him every Tuesday. So that's a perfect proof of what you are saying, that yes, it is our time when how we behave at that time when we are about to face death.
Thank you, Uma. That's exactly right. And as Sharda mentioned earlier, people who've had near-death experiences also report these things and report profound changes in their knowledge, in their attitudes. And recently, there have been a number of studies and a book or two about the experience of hospice workers, people who work with the dying. And it's really quite remarkable to read what they say, what the changes that come over people because of the grace of their own inner nature. They transform themselves into someone who not only is ready to die, but has no fear whatsoever. And this can be read. And yes, and Tuesdays with Maury is a powerful book about that particular experience of the student. Anyone else? Anything at all?
I don't have any personal experience, but I think because we have been following, like if you look at the gospel, Sri Ramakrishna says, in the, in the last years, one day he says, oh, I have so much of pain. And I think it's one of the Swami, he says, we were in such a blast few minutes ago. He says, oh, this rascal found out. This is exactly what it is, because they are not just sitting at meditation for half an hour or 1 hour. In their mind, it is a constant practice of, this is what we call nididhyasana. You just have to keep in mind and try to follow that thought process 24/7. I know it's not easy for anybody, not for me, but that is where our effort should go into. And
Yes.
the second thing is, most of the Upanishads say the main problem is identification with the body. We have to get rid of that identification. And this is only a theoretical knowledge I'm saying. I'm not saying that I reached any of those states, no. But this is the practice. We have to continue to do it. And that is why we need faith, the scriptures, and all the people that who attain these things have the proof of all of these things. And to me, a faith means just like, for example, we're taking a flight, right? We are thinking, yeah, I'm going to reach my destination, but it may not be true. But we are taking that faith into consideration, and that's what we're taking that flight or whatever it is. Even we drive, the same problem. But we have to have that faith in all those things, and we have to work at it 24/7, because Krishna says it takes lifetimes. It may not happen in one lifetime.
Thank you, Balaji. Yes, indeed. And the two really key points are, when we do have our own experience, to cling to that experience, to recollect it constantly, to keep it in mind. This is what you meant by 24/7, as best we can, yes. Keep that in mind. When anything else happens, see how that compares to the experience that you had. Is this more or less than what you experienced? And in the case of our profound spiritual experiences of our true inner being, really nothing else compares with it. And you mentioned nididhyasana. Another term for this is satyagraha, insistence on the truth. When we insist on the truths that we come to know, and as you say, through a working faith, we insist on the truths that we learn from others, whether it be through a book, through a YouTube video, through coming to this chapel some morning, listening to a visiting Swami, like Yogatmananda or someone of that character. We will have an unusually, something that leaves us with an unusual amount of conviction. Hold on to that, hold on to it. And I will emphasize that Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Vivekananda, for that matter, Raja Maharaj, said it need not take lifetimes, that it is available right here, right now. And that's what Vivekananda wrote about in the prayer breaker of this world's chain. How great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. Not later, now. We hold out our hand and say, take my hand, lead me on. And have some confidence. Thank you, Village. Anything else from anyone? Online or here in the chapel?
Brother Shankara, this is Fred.
Yes, Fred.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I wanted to test the Zoom comment feature, but here's what happened to me, for better or worse. Something kind of suddenly took hold of me over, I'd say, a 2-day period where I had this spiritual experience. And ever since then, everything's different. Everything is truly different, and I know it. However, I sort of become habituated to a certain state, and then it feels like there's no progress, and then I start going, well, did I really have something that happened to me, or those kind of things come in. And but like you just said, if I really think back there, and I know it was kind of like a real dividing line that I experienced. So I'm going to keep at it, and I appreciate everyone's comments and the learning that I get from you, Brother Shankar. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Fred. Thank you very much. There is no two ways about it. Our long habits. I mean, if you read either the talk on evolution by Swami Vivekananda, which says we started with the very dawn of creation. Each one of us was born in the dawn of creation. Or you watch the film Everything and Nothing, which is the findings of astrophysicists, quantum physicists, and so on, as of 2016, that comes to the same conclusion, that the universe is alive and that we are born of that aliveness. We've been around a long time, according to their calculations, and this somewhat mirrors what's in the Vedas as well, something like 14 billion years. So these habits that we have of coping with embodiment, wearing this action and experience suit, they're powerful habits. As the teacher James Schwartz says, that which formed those habits is hardwired and intelligent. The only caveat that comes to this mind is, yes, but that which created that which is hardwired and intelligent is not hardwired and is even more intelligent. So if we have recourse to that, if we seek that, and Patanjali tells us how, and that's what will unfold over the course of this month, is what he actually says to do. Then we have the kind of experiences that Fred was just talking about, that Tom Carr mentioned earlier, and that are accessible to all of us. When Swami Vivekananda said, you go in the laboratory and you do the work prescribed by the chemistry instructions, certain results occur. Now, of course, I don't know, probably all of you have had some sort of chemistry experience in school, but I can remember very clearly being in a biology class where we were studying a certain kind of chemistry, and we took a Bunsen burner and we put a beaker, a certain kind of enclosed flask on it. We put one kind of fluid into it, heated it up, put another kind of fluid in it, made sure the temperature was stable at a certain temperature, and then poured what's called a reagent into it, just a small amount of the reagent. This liquid that had just been colorless then turned a bright blue. Suddenly, that beaker, that flask, was not full of liquid at all, but crystals. Boom, just like that. This is just one little experience of studying chemistry. What the Swami is saying is that that is what can happen to us. We will have an experience as dramatic, as powerful, as real as what happened before these eyes, this eye actually, in that biology class in probably 1965. I can still remember it to this very day, how startling it was to have that liquid in an instant turn from this bright blue fluid to a beaker full of crystals. Yes, dear.
I have a comment about that, but I also want to let you know as soon as I'm done commenting that Vipul has a question.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, I believe, for what that's worth, that it can be that startling and dramatic, but I also can believe it can be very quiet and very just, I don't know.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that, and so can I, okay.
Yes, indeed, it can. It can creep up on you that way, so to speak.
Okay, so Vipul.
Vipul, please.
Yeah, namaskaram, brother Shankara. Can you hear me?
Namaste.
Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear you. Yeah.
So we are talking about Raj Yoga and near-death experience and all that parameters. So I think the three things we know, like experience that we know is one is birth, another is life in between, and the death experience, near-death experience. But we don't know after death what happens, correct? So the thing is, when we say we need to learn Raj Yoga, so how it help us to understand these three subject that we know properly, and the fourth subject, that is after death what happens. So after death what happens, once a person get liberated, does it float away to some different planetary system, or what happens?
Vipul,
Mm-hmm.
it's much more productive for us to be focused on what's happening in this moment
Okay.
than what is going to happen after death. As you
Okay.
say, there are many, many, many answers to that question. We'll explore some of them next week in the
Okay.
talk: self-discovery, self-actualization, self-realization. But it avails us very little to project ourselves out into this what's going to happen after death. It's much more useful for us to do what's necessary to overcome the fear of death, so that
Okay.
then when it happens, we are in possession of ourselves.
Okay.
And
Brother Shankara, Amadas here.
Yes, Amadas.
As one passionate about hospice work, I'd like to share that my experience is, as the closer the person gets towards the time of transition, the more the senses withdraw inward, the more the consciousness expands outward in a way that's so hard to describe that I'm not even going to try. And that process is called pratyahara. And so that's something that can be practiced anytime somebody wants to, because that's an organic experience. It happens to everybody. The senses draw inward and then they stop working right before the spirit leaves right before the Atman leaves the body. And that organic practice can be something that I work on in myself, to withdraw the senses inward and expand the consciousness, because it is organic. And that's, to me, what you just said, working with the here and now rather than focusing on what happens right after that, because in dealing with my consciousness on this plane, that gives me leverage, whereas suspecting what happens afterward gives me nothing but fantasy. So just wanted to offer that about, and to what Tom was saying, my experience is the suffering of the body, especially right at the very end, is separate and distinct from what Amma calls the negotiation between our soul and the divine that takes place right before our soul leaves the body.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Amadas. I agree with you entirely about the practice of pratyahara now, which is one of the things we'll talk about over the next couple of weeks. The practice of pratyahara, the withdrawal of the attention from the senses, and the use of that attention, the redirection of that attention to the consciousness, which is already eternal, infinite, and changeless. And our experience of that, little by little, we come to understand that that is who we truly are, which is what Sri Krishna says in chapters 2 through 6 of the Gita. I cannot emphasize enough for those of you who like studying the Gita. Chapters 2 through 6, just read them, then go back to the beginning and read them again, those chapters, because Krishna explains so much of what we've been discussing. Anything else from anyone? This is perfect. This is exactly what we should be doing.
I think, Ramana Maharshi had this experience before he started his journey. He saw a cadaver, a dead body, and then he enacted this in his own house, and he was able to see his own dead body. That is where he started his journey, going into Arunachal and others.
Yes. Well, Ramana Maharshi, of course, is a wonderful example of someone whose life to study. He started, just a few yards from the goal line.
Yes.
One can say.
Yes.
But nevertheless, it took him some years to fully cross that goal line. But we don't know at all how close we are to the goal. Okay, there's just.
I think, Barbara, did you have a comment or question? He has his mic open. Maybe not.
Okay, I'm gonna just finish off this last little bit about that's here on the page. And then anyone else who wants to contribute, that's what we're doing. You may wonder, who is this great sage Patanjali? Where and when did he live? Why and for whom did he write his Yoga Sutras? Swami Prabhavananda, who taught in the United States from 1925 to 1976, wrote this in a translator's foreword to his book, How to Know God, which is his translation and commentary of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So this is in the translator's foreword. Quote, Patanjali's yoga aphorisms are not the original exposition of a philosophy, but a work of compilation and reformulation. References to yoga practices are to be found already in several of the Upanishads, very many centuries early. Indeed, yoga doctrine may be said to have been handed down from prehistoric times. What Patanjali did was to restate yoga philosophy and practice for the seekers of his own period. But what was his period and who was Patanjali? Hardly anything is known about him. As for the date of the sutras, the guesses of scholars vary widely, ranging from the 4th century BCE to the 4th century CE. 800 years, somewhere in there. Yet, now that's the end of his quote, yet, as Prabhavananda remarks elsewhere, this lack of facts about Patanjali matters little when compared to the enduring power of his systematic approach to self-actualization and self-realization. Over the many centuries since they first appeared, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras have completely changed the lives of literally uncounted millions, freeing them from fear and from unsatisfied desire. So Jai Patanjali, Jai Shri Patanjali, Jai Shri Patanjali. So any final comments or thoughts from anyone?
Brother Shankar,
Yes, Bhagarat.
you know, this is it's like a catch-22. We do not want to lose our life and we want to know about death. They are absolutely contradictory because in order to see the end point, we have to develop the practice of living the body from time to time. And our body is made in such a way that we will refuse even for 1 second to be staying away from the body. We are always captured by the body. Very few people like Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna Paramahansa, they learned their technique. This is the reason why he decided on July 4th, I'm going to leave the body. This is not only exclusive to the great people also, because in Netherlands, this was the tradition that the old woman with a large family of 50 people should call the entire family for dinner. It will be a lunchtime. People will be enjoying the lunch. And then she says, now I'm going to go back into my bedroom and sleep and I will not come back. That requires a very special exercise which needs to be developed during life, which we are very reluctant to. This is the reason why we give the example of Shiva. Lord Shiva, when he was told that there is a Rakshasa who is killing everyone and only a wild boar can kill him. So will you please be a wild boar? And Shankar says, no, I would not be like to be a wild boar. No, please be a wild boar. And once you have done your job, then he says, once I have done my job, kill me. Because then I don't want to be alive anymore. They say, okay. So he killed Rakshas. they tried to kill the wild boar and the wild boar ran away. And finally, they pierced in his head, died. Shiva emerged and says, amazing. For that moment, I thought I was a wild boar myself. This is the illusion with which we live all the time. It's very important if you want to learn the chemistry, that when you are in chemical lab, stay away from the experiment. And you cannot be a part of the experiment. And unless you are becoming a part of the experiment, you cannot learn the experiment. That's the reason why you are startled by your observation in the biology lab. Really speaking, you should not have been startled. But you are startled because you became a part of the process. And that's exactly why I like Vedanta. It gradually teaches you, slow at a time, how to truly detach, dissociate. We also say, I'm not a body, but secretly we feel my body is immortal. That is the illusion on which the entire world is dependent, and that's the reason why we are alive, and that's why it's so difficult to fathom the final fact of near death and after death.
Thank you, Bhagirath. You're absolutely right, about, as usual, about so many things. The fact is that we are born in ignorance. We've come to this plane of existence because we want to. The plane of existence has as its substratum this quality of ignorance, a mask over the truth of our nature. And so there are these various yogas, as Swami Vivekananda said. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal of human life is to manifest that divinity. Do this by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, one or more or all of these, and be free. So work, of course, is karma yoga. Worship is bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. Psychic control is the one we're taking up this month, Raja Yoga. And then philosophy, Jnana Yoga, the yoga of wisdom. Each of these has its technology for dispelling our ignorance, that which covers the divinity, which is our inherent true nature and our birthright. Any last thoughts from anyone?
Actually, Kaivalya Upanishad says both mortality and immortality, both of them are mental concepts.
Yes.
So we have to transcend this one, both of these concepts.
Yes, this is what Sri Ramakrishna meant when he said, what's true is beyond is and is not. Beyond is and is not. Yes, in the back.
So much of this involves our identification with us as a body.
Yes.
With the body, and in the world of form and name and function.
Mm-hmm.
That thou art.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's about. And all four of these yogas are what are tools to help us get to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Well, thank you for bringing that up. That's exactly that experience of that thou art. Or another one of the great sayings that says it more directly from a personal point of view is aham brahmasmi. I am that, I am Brahman, the Godhead, that I am that eternal, infinite, changeless being, presence, which is beyond is and is not. So for all of us, as we sit here this moment, those are words. But they can be, according to all of these great saints that we study. Many names have been mentioned this morning. Each one of those great saints says that that can be our heartfelt experience, our heart-known experience. And this, of course, speaking about the yoga of devotion, Sri Chaitanya says, chant the name of the Lord and his glory unceasingly. Practice, in other words, constant recollectedness. Chant the name of the Lord and his glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean and quenched that mighty forest fire, worldly lust, raging furiously within. That raging forest fire, worldly lust, is what keeps us attached to this idea of the body. Yes.
So I feel, Brother Shankara, we've come a long way, especially people who are already on a spiritual path. We have stopped identifying with the possessions we have, or gain fulfillment from power or wealth, and to a certain extent, even identification with the body. So we have come through all those steps. The only last step that is remaining is to detach from the identification of the mind. Intellectually, we all understand we are not minds, but when there is suffering, the mind is unhappy, so we feel we are unhappy. The mind is suffering, so we feel we are suffering. So like that's the most difficult path, but or the difficult step. But once we realize I'm not the mind, the suffering is at the level of the mind. I am the witness. If like that understanding or that realization happens, like that's the last step.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so the good thing is we have come through a lot of initial steps. So it's only the last step that's remaining. Of course, we can't talk about the timeline, but there's the silver lining there.
Yes, and what causes us to surrender our identification with ourselves, with the mind? When we come to a conscious contact, face to face, as the Swami says, with something that is higher than the mind. The mind is what is hardwired and intelligent. That which we contact through these yoga practices is higher than that, more intelligent and not hardwired, infinitely creative. So yes, you're absolutely right. And Tukaram has a very funny couplet in what he says, only a fool kicks a lover out of bed unless he knows he's got two more on the way. This is Tukaram. And he's pointing directly about this idea of doing away with the ego, with our sense of the mind. We have to have the experience that there's two more on the way before we're willing to kick that one out of bed. So this is our privilege. This is our birthright. This is our opportunity but we have to work at it, just like we have to work at anything else that's worth our time and attention. Yes, Uma?
May I add an appendix to what my husband said? Yes, that kind of dichotomy between our body and our mind, and this struggle to love our life and not to let go, and to, at the end, to realize that now it is time to go, and then suddenly to wake up as if we have, or wake up or accept that we have no choice. But to that I would add that although we all struggle, there's a tension between loving life and letting go of life for a higher existence, whether it is there or not. But every bit of practice, every bit of spiritual practice helps. The lectures that we attend here, the books that we read, and some of the messages that we hear over and over again, all these things, I am positive, they leave a deep impression in our mind, in the back of our mind. And if we keep at it without losing our patience and persist in our practice, I do believe, like Swami Vivekananda, that all this is not wasted. Every little bit helps. And I'm looking forward to it, that when that time comes, all these things that I'm hearing right now comes back to me, that it is deep in my consciousness and it will not go away, because my heart is, my flesh is weak, but my mind is capable of overcoming all these obstacles. So I look forward to that this what I'm hearing today will go a long way, in two ways: in transforming my life, whatever years are left, that I become what I want to become. And the last thing, that when that time comes, it will be easy to let go. That's my observation.
Thank you, Uma. Thank you for all of that. Yes, first we let go because we are transformed by experience. We let go because we've experienced something better. And then we don't push away life in any sense or release it anymore. We revel in it. We revel in it, seeing that it is the self made manifest. It is, as you said, that thou art. But when you know that, then this is no longer a prison of pain. It's something else. Anything else? No? Okay.
I remember a metaphor, if it is okay, I'll tell you. This is from the Yoga Vasishtha. Sri Rama asks Vasishtha, even though he's enlightened already, he asks, is Guru and scriptures are the ones that take you from this to the higher level and all those things? Vasishtha says, no, but they do help. And he gives the metaphor, the kids, when they are in the water, they take the pebbles and just play with them. Indirectly, even though they are playing with the rocks, they are cleaning their hands. In a similar way, by reading all these things, it's an interaction between the phenomenal world, the concepts, and the higher concepts. And this keeps your mind clean and, more becomes subtle.
Thank you, Babaji. Yes, exactly. What a nice, and as usual with Vasishta, such a practical and homely metaphor. All right. Those of you in the chapel here can chant along with me. Those of you who wish to chant along at home on Zoom, please mute yourselves.
They don't have to. They don't have to because I have the sound down. They can
Okay,
do it.
very good. Okay, here we go. This is our closing prayer. It's this ancient prayer for peace that Swami Yogeshananda left us. Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees.
Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being.
Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being.
Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So, such a delight to be with you this morning. Now, please do, those of you who are with us here in person, come on in the monastery. There'll be some nice snacks. Shubha Nag, one of the residents here, has kindly arranged all this for us. And we can then spend some time together and enjoy one another's company.
Bye, Zoomies.
Bye, Zoomies, yeah.
We love you guys.
All right.